Today's second top story also comes out of Tallahassee, where the sale of edible products has finally hit the Florida market. Today, we have some great reporting by Jeff Smith from Marijuana Business Daily. I will have his articles posted below in the show notes. But to help along with details regarding Florida's edible market, I did use some articles from perusing the internet, so those sources will be posted in the show notes. But back in April of 2019, Florida's Department of Agriculture finalized its rules for medical marijuana growers surrounding edible products. Now, one of the big concerns about edible products hitting the market was, were they safe in regards to food poisoning and for people with allergies? Why are these two issues a problem? Well, because a lot of times patients who consume medical cannabis already have either compromised immune systems or other health related issues. So the Department of Agriculture wanted to be more than diligent in ensuring a safe rollout of the edible products. Now, back in April of 2019, the next step was for the Department of Health to issue its rules regarding edible products. Now, these are the rules we've been waiting for. We are now past 1 year since that day, and finally, the Department of Health have issued their regulations, which we will definitely break down the important and relevant ones for you. Trulieve, as usual, was first to market here. They sold their edibles in its hometown dispensary of Quincy on September 2nd of this year, 2020. And if you recall, Trulieve was the first dispensary to sell whole flower as well when that became available in 2019. Now, the rules have been a work in progress. Essentially, the medical marijuana market in Florida has been a work in process itself since its inception. Tinctures and oil were initially available. Then we know smokable flower came later, but edibles were essentially put on the back burner because of these developing rules and regulations. But now that's complete, and patients can incorporate edibles into their treatment plans. Now, back to the regulations specifically. Florida law now mandates edibles take the form of baked goods, chocolates, gelatins, or drink powders. Now, according to Florida regulations, we do have some restrictions on edible products. First, edible products must not resemble commercially available candy. And we've seen this with knockoff brands and parody brands like Sour Patch turning into Stoner Patch or other jokes kind of like that. So the other restriction is that the edibles must be in geometric shapes. So plain, squares, circles, well, you name it, no real animal or other enticing shapes. And third, edibles can include baked goods, chocolate, lozenges, gelatin. So there's a bunch of different form factors the companies can create edibles with. Another important restriction is that the edible products must not resemble any form that appeals to children. Now, this is a provision we see essentially in every state's cannabis market, regardless of recreational or medical. It's a widely used provision. It's widely imposed across the country. So essentially, no bright colors or appealing to children. No resemblance of candies on the commercial market. Remember, we want to ensure the safety and availability of medical marijuana to Florida citizens, not to children. Now, in other markets like Colorado and California, or even in the black market, we can see cannabis products essentially rip off from current candies. So, edibles have actually been a popular product of the black market for being counterfeit and have been the subject of many trademark disputes. So, for example, in March of this year, a California cannabis company called Canico, they were promoting their cannabis-infused cookies that were eerily similar to the Girl Scout cookie brands. Yes, those Girl Scouts. They've had their fair share. The Girl Scouts have had their fair share of legal disputes, ranging from trademark infringement in relation to the famous strain Girl Scout cookies to misappropriation of their trademark, which is the case here. Another example is in August of 2019, there was also a dispute between the makers of Sour Patch Kids versus Stony Patch, which is a maker of cannabis-infused candy in California. So these companies essentially, this company was selling their infused THC candy, parodying the real candy. And when looking at the images online between the two products, I mean, they're virtually identical in the packaging, using The Sour Patch characters we all know and love with the yellow bag, but including marijuana leaves. So it's obvious how a kid could easily, or a child, could easily misconstrue Stony Patch for the original Sour Patch. And another example that's pretty popular in the industry is Hershey's. Hershey's Chocolate. They initiated multiple lawsuits against companies that branded their cannabis infused products with the names like Mr. Dank Bar, which resembles Mr. Good Bar, and Reefer's Peanut Butter Cups, resembling Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. Normally, these cases settle out of court, but you need to know these do exist. So here's the problem with these candies, and this goes back to why Florida implemented strict regulations with the advertising and the way the edible products look. First problem is confusion. If the products are similar enough that consumers, especially kids, will become confused or easily lured as to which product is the real one and which product contains THC, that's a problem. That's a problem. Remember, our goal is to ensure that medical marijuana is available and safe. And if you're allowing companies to essentially rip off other companies or use their commercial prowess, that's not achieving that goal. The second issue, so essentially we have another issue going on here. We have these established companies saying, "Hey, when you make cannabis products that resemble our brand, you're tarnishing our name." Because now every time someone buys a Stony Patch or buys a Mr. Dank Bar, they're going to think Sour Patch, or they're going to think Mr. Good Bar. And the makers of these candies, the original makers, probably don't want that association. And that's how, cease and desist letters arise, and that's how lawsuits are filed. Okay, but back to the good stuff. So the release of edible products into Florida's market is important for a variety of reasons. Number one, it's another product the MMTCs can sell. Predictions say the new market segment could generate up to $250 million in sales for the first full year. Now, we know our market in Florida has slowly implemented a full gamut of products. First, in the early days, we had only low THC products that were allowed to be sold. Then it took a little, some more work in the legislature to even sell the whole flower. Now we're seeing the introduction of edible products. We're watching the market advance step by step. Yes, it's at a snail's pace, but we're making progress. And meanwhile, we have the more mature markets on the West Coast that have been selling everything up and down the supply chain for a while. But because their market has a much longer history in relation to the legal cannabis markets generally in the United States, the West Coast suffers from a big black market. And that's why you see a lot of these parody companies getting sued primarily on the West Coast. Now, another reason why the issuance of edibles is important is that the number of Florida patients are rising rapidly. We have over 430,000 patients, and this is just another chance for companies to make more profit. The customer's average age in Florida is around 50 years old, and this part of the market, these citizens have been demanding this form of medication for years, since the beginning. Edible products, they have less stigma associated with them. There's no smoking. They're easier to consume. So I'm glad that they finally got introduced into our market. I'm also interested to see how the introduction of edibles into the market will affect the overall sales on smokable flower and other products. I think the demand for raw flower will always be there no matter what, but it will be interesting to see how much edibles cut into those margins. Now, the third reason why the introduction of edibles is important for us is because the introduction of edibles also brings the opportunity for licensing deals, which fosters new relationships with out-of-state edible companies. And MMTCs have been making moves on this end as a result of new rules being issued. Here are a few examples. So we have Sarasota-based AltMed, which AltMed now has 25 dispensaries across the state, and they operate under the Move brand, MUV. They announced in September an exclusive licensing agreement to produce and distribute Colorado-based Wana Brands edibles. Second example here, we have TrueLeave. They've built out a 10,000 square foot commercial grade kitchen. They're going ahead and making their own branded product line of gummies and chocolates. And they already have these products in their storefronts. So make sure to go out whenever you get a chance and ask your bud tenders if they're available. In addition to TrueLeave creating their own brand of products, they also have licensing deals set up with companies like Bang in Miami, as well as Denver-based edibles companies Binsky, District Edibles, and Love's Oven to produce cookies, brownies, and other edibles. Now, they are pending state health department approvals, but I'm pretty sure just before I started recording this episode, I saw TrueLeave on their Instagram page promoting their Love Ovens cookies. So TrueLeave here has 4 or 5 licensing deals in addition to their own branded products. Bluma Wellness, which operates dispensaries under the One Plant Florida brand, they plan to launch edibles later in the year with a focus on gummies, cookies, and a cool product, pretzels. I'm a sucker for pretzels, so I will definitely keep an eye out for those. Bluma Wellness is planning also to sell its own branded products, as well as edibles obtained through a licensing partnership with California-based Venice Cookie Co. We've got some more examples here. So the MMTCs are really hitting hard on the edibles in terms of partnerships. So Fluent, on October 13th, announced that they received approval from the Florida Department of Health to start selling their edible products at each of their dispensaries across the state. Fluent released their own product line called Fluent Gels, which are bite-sized pieces available in a few flavors like green apple, watermelon, and blue raspberry. Fluent makes their edibles in partnership with Smokies, which is a nationally known edible product brand. The gummies are vegan, gluten-free, non-dairy, and contain no high fructose corn syrup. Now, so Fluent, this is cool because Fluent is an example of a company who already is trying to differentiate themselves in this new segment of the industry. It shows how fierce the competition is in Florida. So Fluent is going to try to attract consumers who care about the vegan, gluten-free, non-dairy, who care more of the health, what they're putting in their body. So this is an example of a company trying to set itself apart to gain more of that market dominance, to create their foothold in the market. Now, our final example here is Curaleaf. They also released their line of edible products. They released some fruit gummies, chocolate gummies, apple bars, but I'm actually not sure if they've hit the Florida storefronts yet. My local Curaleaf does not have any of these products in stock, but if you venture to one of these MMTCs, please feel free to reach out to me on Twitter or Instagram. You could find us at FL Cannabis Pod, and just let me know your thoughts on the products. I'd love to hear your opinions. Now, the introduction of edibles raises interesting questions about cannabis and interstate commerce. One question I've been thinking about through this journey of watching the United States cannabis market become legal is their impact on interstate commerce. So we know at the federal level in the United States, cannabis is a Schedule I controlled substance. It's illegal to produce, cultivate, and sell cannabis at the federally speaking. Now, this also means cannabis cannot be transported across state lines. They're federal crimes. These are federal crimes under the Controlled Substances Act. But because of a little thing called the Dormant Commerce Clause, states can implement their own intrastate, that is, in-state cannabis markets that operate only inside a single state. Scholars and legal writers argue that this setup is possible under the Dormant Commerce Clause, where states can have legal markets while producing cannabis is federally legal at the same time, because under the Dormant Commerce Clause, states may regulate local aspects of interstate commerce so long as they do not unduly burden or discriminate against interstate commerce. But, the Dormant Commerce Clause only applies if the federal government has not acted. So, those scholarly papers that argue that this is possible under the Dormant Commerce Clause, I kind of disagree because the federal government has acted. They've implemented the Controlled Substances Act. So arguing that interstate commerce between states should happen because of the Dormant Commerce Clause, in my opinion, is unlikely to hold weight in court. I think they have a better argument under the 10th Amendment. But states' rights, that whole argument. But in my opinion, we will have to wait until federal legalization to see the actual importation and exportation between state lines of actual products. And rest assured, guys, there are groups every day. There's senators, congressional members, nonprofit organizations, governors working every day to get cannabis federally legalized. There are some interesting developments on the West Coast. There's a group of states doing a pact between each other to ship cannabis between the states. I might tackle this issue in a later episode, but those two states, it's mainly Oregon, but their partner that they're trying to work with is the state of California. So essentially, what's going on here is that Oregon, being ahead of the curve as usual, and I don't know if you saw they legalized psilocybin on election night, but last year in 2019, Oregon passed a bill that essentially would allow the importation and exportation of cannabis products, but it doesn't mean anything until another state signs on. No other state has approved rules for exportation or importation. But as I said, California would be the ideal partner here, but there's been no movement on their end in regard to this partnership. Another interesting development we had last year was two Oregon Democrats, Representative Earl Blumenauer and Senator Ron Wyden. They introduced the State Cannabis Commerce Act, which is a federal bill that would allow importation and exportation amongst legal states, states that have legal markets. But the bill actually had, it had some hype across the cannabis mainstream media, but it has stalled in the House, in a House subcommittee, and I definitely will report back on developments relating to these two issues. But again, back to the states and their own cannabis markets. This because states are allowed essentially to create their own cannabis markets because first of the 10th Amendment, states' rights, the Cole Memo, which essentially says is an informal agreement that the federal government will not use federal funds to prosecute cannabis operators who are abiding by state law. Now, the trick here is that these states or the companies that operate in the states, they cannot participate in interstate commerce between the states. They cannot create cannabis products in one state and ship it or do transaction between state lines. So the question becomes, how are these companies, how are these Florida MMTCs, how is Curaleaf, TrueLeaf, Fluent, how are they doing partnerships with other companies across state lines if it's federally illegal if it's federally illegal? Well, the main problem federal prohibition places is essentially this. So for example, a Colorado cannabis edible manufacturer cannot create edible products in Colorado and then ship their products to California. Rather, what this hypothetical Colorado cannabis company has to do is that they have to set up a partnership with a manufacturer in California to produce their edibles in California. Now, putting your business owner hat on, this makes operations for you so much more expensive. I mean, now they're going to have to find a partnership with a manufacturer in California. They're going to have to teach them how to make their gummies and ensure it's the same exact high quality gummy they produce in Colorado. I mean, wouldn't you rather just continue with your manufacturing operations in Colorado and then just simply put your edible products in a cardboard box and ship them to California? Now, because of because of the federal prohibition on interstate commerce, it requires you as your Colorado operator to go and set up a new shop in California. Now, this example brings light to how far behind the barriers or essentially it just shows how far behind the cannabis industry is to every other industry in the United States. The barriers the companies in this industry face is crazy. It shows how young the market really is. I mean, can you think of another industry where a business cannot ship their product across state lines and make sales, especially in the digital age of e-commerce? So, for example, applying this law to our partnerships in Florida. So let's take the partnership with AltMed and Wana Brands. AltMed Florida, they have an agreement to produce Wana brand edibles in Florida and distribute in Florida. So Wana Brands, what they do, They're not located in Florida, but they probably set up their standard operating procedures with AltMed. AltMed follow those procedures in their kitchens in Florida. Now, in a perfect world where cannabis is legal on the federal level, all Wana brands would have to do, because they're based out of Colorado, would simply ship their edible products to AltMed in Florida. Thus, they would be able to bypass all of the extra legwork that needs to be done to set up operations in Florida. But no, that's not how it works. So essentially what they're doing is they're setting up a partnership, and they're going to make AltMed produce the edible products. Partnerships between the MMTCs and edible companies, it's a workaround businesses are using to expand their operations in this super regulated market and provide a more diverse array of products into their states. Edibles is a perfect example of a product that shows the workarounds companies can do to get around the federal prohibition. Now, let's take a moment to imagine a world where it is federally legal. It would twist our current setup, our current valuations of these companies. It would twist it up tenfold. If all of a sudden we went federally legal, let's say under the Biden administration, we go federally legal, states who do not allow cannabis in their state, they cannot prohibit companies from selling cannabis in their states. So states wouldn't be able to block or limit out-of-state companies from entering their state and selling cannabis. Of course, there would be regulations like state licensing issues, but we also have to consider what would happen to these intrastate licenses. Remember, if you get a license in one state, it's only allows you to do operations in that state. So in our current situation, we know states have their own licensing structures. States issue their own licenses. If you have a Florida license, you could only operate in Florida. So what happens to the value of these licenses that have sold for $40-60 million? I think the value would be shown in being a first mover. I think being a first mover, the value of that will truly be shown if we go federally legal. The market will tell us. It will always tell us in the end. We'll truly see how important being a first mover in the industry is once we're legalized on the federal level. I think federal legalization would be more efficient, but it would cause massive disruption to our industry as we see it today. We could see big companies come in and acquire the multi-state operators like we've seen with Constellation Brands and Canopy Growth a few years ago. Not that Canopy Growth is a US MSO, just that we see big companies, billion-dollar companies like Constellation, make investments into the biggest cannabis company in the world at one point, Canopy Growth. And we could see opportunities for smaller businesses to really get their foothold in the industry. We'll see what happens under the next administration, but it's definitely an interesting development.